You've been that person who feels everything, every shift in someone's mood, every unspoken tension in a room, every hidden intention behind a smile. You walk into a space and within seconds you can sense who's hurting, who's angry, who needs something from you. It's like you have this radar that never turns off, constantly scanning, constantly picking up signals that other people don't even notice. And for years, maybe your whole life, you thought this was who you were supposed to be. The one who understands, the one who cares, the one who absorbs everyone else's emotional chaos and somehow tries to make sense of it, tries to fix it, tries to make everyone feel better. But here's what nobody told you. Here's the truth that's been hidden from you behind all those pretty words about empathy and compassion and being a good person. Your empathy, that beautiful gift you thought made you special, has been turned into a weapon against you. Every single day, people have been using your sensitivity like a remote control, pressing your buttons, making you dance to their emotional music, and you didn't even realize it was happening. You feel guilty when someone's upset. You feel responsible when there's conflict. You feel this crushing weight on your chest when you think you've disappointed someone, even someone who's treated you like garbage. And the worst part? You've been trained to believe that this is love, that this is what it means to be a good person, that if you stop caring this much, if you stop absorbing everyone's pain, if you stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of other people's feelings, then something is wrong with you. But what if I told you that the moment you stop caring in the way they've conditioned you to care, everything changes? Not just in how people treat you, but in your actual position within the social hierarchy. Your rank shifts, your value transforms, the power dynamic flips, and suddenly the same people who took you for granted start looking at you differently, start treating you with a respect they never showed before, start chasing the attention they used to receive freely. This isn't about becoming cold or heartless. This isn't about shutting down your emotions or pretending you don't feel anything. This is about understanding something fundamental about human nature, about social hierarchy, about the brutal mechanics of how respect and power actually work in the real world. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. In the hierarchy of human relationships, empaths typically occupy the lower rungs, not because they're less intelligent or less capable, but because their empathy has been weaponized into compliance. They care too much, which means they can be controlled too easily. They feel too deeply, which means they can be manipulated too readily. They give too freely, which means their value gets taken for granted too completely. The person who cares less in any relationship holds more power. This isn't cynical, this isn't cruel, this is just observable reality. Watch any interaction where one person is emotionally invested and the other isn't, and you'll see the power differential instantly. The one who needs less, who wants less, who's willing to walk away, that's the one who sets the terms. And empaths, by their very nature, have been programmed to be the opposite, to need connection, to want harmony, to be terrified of walking away, which means they've been unconsciously positioned at the bottom of every relationship hierarchy they enter. But something fascinating happens when an empath finally hits their breaking point, when they've been used one too many times, when they've been manipulated one too many times, when they've given their energy, their time, their emotional labor to people who wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire. Something inside them breaks, but it's not a weak breaking, it's not a collapse, it's a breaking free. It's the moment when all that accumulated pain, all that stored resentment, all that suppressed awareness of how they've been treated finally reaches a critical mass and explodes into a single, clear realization. Don't actually have to care this much. I don't actually have to feel responsible for everyone. I don't actually have to absorb everyone's emotional garbage. And in that moment, their rank begins to change. Because the empath who stops caring in the conditioned way, who stops being available for emotional exploitation, who stops performing the role of emotional support animal for everyone around them, that empath becomes something else entirely. They become a mirror. And mirrors are terrifying to people who've been using you as their emotional dumping ground. Now, before we go further, I need to ask you something. And I want you to be completely honest with me. How many times have you ignored your own needs because someone else seemed to need you more? How many times have you pushed down your own feelings because you didn't want to burden anyone? How many times have you been there for people who disappeared the moment you needed them? If any of this resonates with you, if you've spent years being the person everyone turns to but nobody shows up for, I want you to leave a comment right now saying, "I've been that person." That's all. Just those 4 words, because when you write, that you're doing something powerful. You're acknowledging a pattern that's been controlling your life. And more importantly, you're going to see hundreds, maybe thousands of other people writing the same thing. And suddenly, this pain you thought was unique to you, this experience you thought meant something was wrong with you, you'll realize it's a systematic pattern. It's not your weakness, it's a role you were conditioned into. So go ahead, write in the comments, "I've been that person," and let's create a space here where we can be honest about what it's really like to give everything and receive crumbs in return. Now let's talk about what actually happens in the social hierarchy when the empath stops caring. First, understand that social hierarchies aren't just about who has the most money or the most status or the most obvious power. Social hierarchies are maintained through emotional economies. Who gives emotional labor and who receives it? Who invests energy and who extracts it? Who pursues and who's pursued? Who needs and who's needed? In most relationships involving an empath, they're the ones giving, investing, pursuing, needing. They're the emotional labor provider. They're the ones checking in, smoothing things over, making sure everyone's okay, carrying the emotional weight of maintaining the relationship. And the other person, whether it's a friend, a romantic partner, a family member, a colleague, they're receiving, they're extracting, they're being pursued, they're being needed. This creates a clear hierarchy where the empath is in the one-down position, constantly working to maintain the connection, while the other person can be casual, can be distant, can show up when it's convenient for them. The empath has trained everyone around them that their attention, their care, their emotional support is freely available on demand, which means it has no value. This is basic economics applied to human relationships. When something is abundant and freely given, its perceived value drops to 0. But watch what happens when the empath withdraws, when they stop texting first, when they stop checking in, when they stop being emotionally available at 3 in the morning, when they stop absorbing other people's moods and trying to fix them, when they stop performing the emotional labor that everyone got so accustomed to. Suddenly, there's a vacuum. The people who were casually receiving all that attention and care suddenly notice its absence. And this is where the hierarchy shift begins. Because now the empath has done something most people never expected them capable of doing. They've withdrawn their labor. They've created scarcity where there used to be abundance. And scarcity, as any economist will tell you, creates value. The person who used to text the empath whenever they wanted something now sends a message and gets no response, or gets a delayed response, or gets a response that's polite but distant, and something shifts in their brain. Wait, why aren't they as available as they used to be? Did I do something wrong? Are they upset with me? And just like that, the dynamic has reversed. Now they're the ones checking in. They're the ones pursuing. They're the ones feeling that uncomfortable uncertainty that the empath used to feel constantly. This is where we need to talk about attachment theory and how it relates to social hierarchy. In any relationship, there's typically a pursuer and a distancer. The pursuer is anxiously attached to the connection, constantly seeking reassurance, validation, confirmation that the relationship is okay. The distancer is avoidantly attached, comfortable with space, often pulling away when things get too intense or demanding. Empaths almost always occupy the pursuer role. They're the ones anxiously monitoring the relationship, sensitive to any signs of disconnection, quick to try to repair any ruptures, which automatically places them in the lower power position. Because the pursuer is always at the mercy of the distancer. The pursuer needs the relationship more, which gives the distancer control. But when the empath stops pursuing when they move, from anxious to secure or even avoidant attachment, the entire power structure collapses. The person who used to be the distancer suddenly finds themselves in unfamiliar territory. They're not being pursued anymore. They're not being given that constant stream of attention and emotional energy. And, human nature being what it is, they often start pursuing. Not because they suddenly realize the empath's value, but because their ego can't handle the loss of that reliable source of validation. Let me give you a concrete example. There's a woman I know, let's call her Sarah. Sarah was the ultimate empath in her friend group. She was the one everyone called when they had a problem, the one who organized all the gatherings, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, the one who checked in when someone was going through something difficult. She gave and gave and gave, and her friends took and took and took. They would cancel plans with her at the last minute. They would vent to her for hours but never ask how she was doing. They would disappear when she needed support, but reappear instantly when they needed something from her. For years, this was the pattern, and Sarah accepted it, because she thought that's what friendship meant. That's what caring meant. Then something happened. Sarah went through a genuinely difficult time, a family crisis that shook her to her core, and she reached out to her friends, and one by one they were busy. They were dealing with their own stuff. They'd get back to her later. Later never came. And in that moment, Sarah realized something. These people weren't her friends. They were her clients. She'd been providing a service, emotional support on demand, and they'd been consuming it. But the moment she needed that service returned, they were unavailable. So Sarah stopped. She stopped texting first, stopped organizing things, stopped checking in, stopped being emotionally available. She didn't make an announcement. She didn't have a confrontation. She just quietly withdrew her labor, and within 2 weeks her phone was blowing up. Where have you been? Are you okay? We miss you, let's hang out. Every single person who'd been taking her for granted was suddenly reaching out. Not because they cared about her well-being, but because they noticed the absence of her care for them. And this is where Sarah did something brilliant. She didn't rush back. She didn't immediately resume her old role. She stayed withdrawn. She responded politely but distantly. She was busy. She had other plans. She'd get back to them later. She mirrored exactly what they'd been doing to her for years, and her rank in that social group completely changed. The people who used to treat her like an emotional support animal now treated her with respect. They started actually asking about her life. They started reciprocating effort. They started valuing her time. Not because they became better people overnight, but because Sarah had fundamentally shifted the power dynamic by withdrawing her freely given care. This brings us to a crucial concept in understanding social hierarchy and power dynamics: the concept of strategic withdrawal. In military strategy, a tactical retreat isn't a sign of weakness. It's often the smartest move available. You withdraw from a position that's costing you resources, regroup, and force the enemy to overextend themselves pursuing you. The same principle applies to social dynamics. When you're in a low-power position in a relationship, whether it's friendship, romance, or professional, sometimes the most powerful move available is to withdraw. Not to disappear completely, not to burn bridges, but to strategically reduce your investment, your availability, your emotional labor. This serves multiple purposes. First, it stops the bleeding. You're no longer pouring energy into a dynamic that's depleting you. Second, it creates scarcity. Your attention and care, which were abundant, are now limited. Third, it forces the other person to either step up or reveal their true nature. If they don't even notice your withdrawal, you have your answer about how much they valued you. If they notice and still don't change their behavior, you have your answer. And if they notice and suddenly start treating you better, well, now you know exactly how to maintain respect in that relationship. But here's where it gets really interesting from a human nature perspective. Why does this work? Why does withdrawing care actually increase your rank in social hierarchies? It comes down to something fundamental about how humans assess value. We don't value things based on their objective worth. We value things based on their scarcity and the effort required to obtain them. This is why people obsess over limited edition items, why they want what they can't have, why they chase people who are less available. The empath who's always available, always caring, always giving, they're like a product that's always on sale. Their value gets mentally discounted. The empath who's selective with their care, who's not. Always available, who requires effort to access. They're like a luxury product. Their value gets mentally inflated. This isn't fair. This isn't how it should be. But this is how human psychology actually works. We are wired to pursue scarcity and take abundance for granted. Now, some people hear this and think it's manipulative. They think it's game playing. They think it's fake. But let me ask you something. What's more fake? Genuinely protecting your energy and only giving care to people who reciprocate? Or pretending to be endlessly available for people who treat you like garbage because you're afraid of being seen as selfish? The truth is, boundaries aren't manipulation. Selectivity isn't game playing. Valuing yourself isn't fake. What's fake is the performance of unconditional care for people who offer nothing in return. What's manipulative is the social conditioning that tells empaths they're bad people if they stop letting themselves be used. What's game playing is how society teaches empaths to ignore their own needs while telling them it's for their own good. When an empath stops caring in the conditioned way, they're not becoming cold. They're becoming discerning. They're not shutting down their empathy. They're directing it strategically. They're not losing their sensitivity. They're protecting it from people who would weaponize it. This is what mature empathy looks like. Not the indiscriminate emotional labor for anyone who asks, but the careful, boundaried reciprocal exchange of care with people who've proven they deserve it. And this mature empathy commands respect in a way that naive empathy never can. Because mature empathy says, I have value, and I'm selective about who receives it. Naive empathy says, I'll give you whatever you want, regardless of how you treat me. Which one do you think occupies a higher position in the social hierarchy? Let's talk about what this looks like in practice. How does an empath actually stop caring in the way that shifts their rank? First, they stop emotional eavesdropping. Most empaths are constantly tuned in to everyone's emotional state. They walk into a room and immediately start scanning. Who's upset? Who's tense? Who needs something? This constant monitoring is exhausting, and it positions you as the emotional servant. So you stop. You walk into a room and you focus on your own state, your own comfort, your own needs. If someone's upset, that's their responsibility to communicate, not your responsibility to detect and fix. Second, they stop preemptive peacemaking. Empaths often smooth over tensions before they even fully materialize. Someone seems irritated, and the empath immediately goes into damage control mode. Stop. Let the tension exist. Let people handle their own emotions. Let conflicts surface naturally instead of constantly managing everyone's feelings to prevent discomfort. Third, they stop over-explaining and over-apologizing. Empaths tend to explain their every decision and apologize for taking up space. This constant justification signals low status. High-status people don't explain themselves to everyone. They don't apologize for having needs. They state what they want clearly and move on. Fourth, they stop being instantly available. When someone texts or calls, the empath usually responds immediately. This trains people that you're always accessible. Start adding delays. Not to play games, but to signal that you have a life, priorities, and boundaries. Your immediate availability is no longer a given. Fifth, they stop pursuing connections that aren't reciprocated. If you're always the one reaching out, always the one making plans, always the one checking in, stop. Match the energy you receive. If someone wants to see you, they know how to contact you. If they don't make the effort, you have valuable information about how much they value the relationship. Sixth, they stop absorbing other people's emotional states. When someone's anxious, angry, or depressed, empaths tend to absorb that emotion and carry it. You start feeling their anxiety, their anger, their depression. Stop taking on emotions that aren't yours. You can acknowledge someone's feeling without becoming their emotional container. Seventh, they stop giving advice and solutions unless specifically asked. Empaths often jump in to fix and help, but unsolicited help, no matter how well-intentioned, positions you as the servant. Let people solve their own problems. If they want your input, they'll ask. Eighth, they start saying no without elaborate explanations. No is a complete sentence. You don't need to justify why you're not available, why you don't want to do something, why you're prioritizing yourself. Just, no, I can't, and move on. When do you implement these changes, something profound happens. The people who are using you for emotional labor either step up or step out. Some people, when they realize you're no longer freely available, will actually start treating you with respect. They'll start reciprocating. They'll start valuing your time and energy. These are the relationships worth keeping. Other people, when they realize you're no longer available for exploitation, will get angry. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll try to guilt you back into your old role. These are the people you needed to filter out anyway. They never valued you as a person. They valued you as a function, and now that you're no longer performing that function, they have no use for you. Good. Let them go. Because every person who leaves because you set boundaries is making space for people who will actually respect those boundaries. Here's what you need to understand about social hierarchy and human nature. Respect isn't given to the most giving people. Respect is given to people who demonstrate self-respect. When you constantly sacrifice yourself, when you constantly put others first, when you constantly absorb everyone's emotional chaos, you're signaling that you don't value yourself very highly. And if you don't value yourself, why should anyone else value you? But when you demonstrate boundaries, when you're selective with your energy, when you prioritize your own well-being, you're signaling that you have high self-value. And people unconsciously respond to that signal by adjusting how they treat you. This is why the empath who stops caring the way they've been conditioned to care suddenly gets treated better. They've stopped signaling low value and started signaling high value. The hierarchy adjusts accordingly. Now, let's address something important. Some people worry that if they stop being so empathetic, so caring, so giving, they'll lose relationships. And you will. You'll lose the relationships that were based on exploitation. You'll lose the people who were in your life because you were useful, not because they genuinely cared about you. And this is terrifying at first, because even a bad relationship